Kia ora koto. Welcome to this evening's event of the At the Bay Ite Kokoro Sparkling Prose Competition for 2025. It's our awards event taking place on October 14th, which is Katherine Mansfield's birthday. So it's a pleasure to see everybody here. We have the shortlisted writers in the room prepared to share some of their work, and we have special guests. I'm Michelle Elvey. I'm part of At the Bay Ite Kokoro, and along with a big, wonderful team that are all fans of short story writing. So I will introduce our guests. We have three special guests here, and then we have a whole room of writers with us as well. For those of you who are watching live, you're welcome to, in the second half, in the second part of our conversation, you're welcome to ask questions by typing into the YouTube live stream boxes, and we'll try to field those and bring you in as well. So we're going to have some readings, we're going to have some discussion, and we're going to hear the awards. So thanks everybody for coming. Our guests tonight are the two judges for this year's competition, which are Lynn Jenner and Gina Cole. They will be names familiar to many of you already. Gina Cole is a writer of Fijian, Scottish, and Welsh descent. She lives in Tamaki Makaurau. Her short story collection, Black Ice Matter, won the Best First Book Fiction Award at the Occams several years back. And she's a teacher of creative writing, and she was appointed in 2023 a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services. So we're really pleased to have this highly esteemed person in our mix. Lynn Jenner is also an award-winning writer. Her first book, Dear Sweet Harry, won the Adam Prize for Creative Writing and the Jessie McKay Best First Book Poetry Prize at the Occams years ago as well. And she has several other books that span between creative nonfiction and historical research and also poetry. So the writers that we have who were the judges this year are very adept at moving between genre, at working in these delicate spaces with voice and not just character and plot, but all the things that are often not said in short story writing. And it's a really wonderful combination that we have this year. So thanks, Gina and Lynn, for being here. We also have Fiona Farrell with us tonight. We invited Fiona because she's one of our very esteemed writers who also works across so many different genres: poetry, novels, short fiction, plays, and also nonfiction. Everyone will probably know her latest novel, The Deck, which came out a couple years ago. And she's been highly acclaimed with the Prime Minister's Award for Fiction and also the ONZM for Services to Literature. So we invited Fiona tonight, mostly because we know her and love her to be in conversations like this, but also she was a Katherine Mansfield Montan Fellow in 1995. So it's really wonderful to have these three people who have perspective and view of their own work, but also scanning the New Zealand literary landscape and bringing their own views into that. So I thought I would begin tonight by asking the three of them about this theme, double lives. And short story writing has been on my mind quite a lot this year. I just last month judged the Dan Davin Short Story Awards. And in doing so, I had to prepare a lecture and give a little talk about Dan Davin and his short story writing. And I dove in quite deep. And one of the things that really struck me that I found so interesting was that, and a lot of you will know this, that Dan Davin was from Southland and grew up in Invercargill and Gore. He went to Otago University, and then he went to England. And he spent all of his life over there. He came back several times, but really he lived there. He had his family there. He did all of his writing there. He was an editor there for decades and decades, an award-winning editor. But one of the things he really did was he connected always back to New Zealand literature. It was where he came from. It was where he felt his stories mostly took place. And he really channeled his fine tuning into capturing not only things from his youth, but ideas that came from New Zealand. And what I found really interesting is, and this will be familiar to many of you who know Dan Davin, is that he characterized himself as being an intimate stranger to his country of birth. I love this idea of intimate stranger because I think that it connects really well with what the short story can do. You know, it's not the novel, so we don't have all that room to explore everything, but you've got more room than a small prose piece, a flash fiction. So you can bring us into a great deal of intimacy and create distances where you want. And I thought that might resonate as well with this theme of double lives. So keeping those ideas in mind, I thought I would throw that to Fiona, Lynn, and Gina and see what ideas have occurred to you as you've been thinking about this theme, double lives, and also this idea of the intimacy and the distance that can happen in the short story. That's something I'd love to hear you talk about. Um, Lynn, should we go to you first?
By all means, good evening, everybody. Kia ora. Um, I thought the idea of double lives sort of zinged in my head when I read it, and I thought, what a really, it just seemed like something kind of magical, and so I sort of took myself off in a whole lot of different ways to think about it, and I found that other people have thought about it too. So I tried thinking about what Catherine Mansfield was doing in 1922 and what was double about that. And I thought, because she died in 1923, so she was very, very ill in 1922, and she was still writing. And I guess I was thinking, well, as part of her double life, then in 1922 is that she's alive on the page and you know deathly ill in her body, um, and then I also saw I must have been sort of hanging around in the 1920s because I also saw that Gertrude Stein said that everybody everybody lives a double life and everybody needs a double life, and that one having one person sort of to be one person isn't enough, and that you need more than one person to be doing all this writing stuff. So yes, everybody's thought about it. um, the people who, and then I just looked at the stories that people wrote in the competition, and I thought, it's amazing, isn't it amazing what people jump off, how people jump off from something that, I mean, in this case, the prompt is given. It's not people haven't sat around and thought, oh, gee, I'll write a short story. What shall I write about? The prompt is actually given, and then away it goes, and it goes in so many different directions. It was absolutely incredible to see how much that happened. Um, this is the week of the Nobel Prize award, and it went to a Hungarian man, Laszlo. Let me have a go at butchering his name, Krasznahorkai. And he's a very interesting guy, just in case you want to go and read something really interesting and Middle European and fairly obscure. And he was saying a story is a black box. A short story, as opposed to a novel, is a black box where no one knows what happened. And I think that's kind of what happened in this prompt, that um, it was a black box that people kind of reached into, and away they went in all kinds of different ways. And yeah, it was in my opinion, a very successful prompt, and opened up a lot of space for people to have fun with.
That's so interesting. I love the quote about the black box and also that uncertainty. Because I
Mm,
think a lot of the times, I mean, we all know that you don't have to tie everything up with meat. Get all the
mm,
loose ends tied up, leaving it open either for your reader, because you have that relationship between the page and the reader, or even for yourself and your characters. Those
mm,
kind of unknown quantities, I think, are often what make short story such an elevated quality of writing. So
mm.
that's really interesting, Lynn. Thank you for that. Dina or Fiona?
Uh,
Oh,
you go, Gina.
tēnā koutou katoa, ni sambula vanaka. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, the theme double life came from a book about Catherine Mansfield's letters by Andrew Bennett. And in one of those letters, she writes, "There is no happiness greater than this, leading a double life." And that's a reference to what she calls the mysterious experience of writing, which involves a writer who, on the one hand, exists in the reality and the circumstances of their own life, and on the other hand, and at the same time, they exist in the story they are writing. And in Mansfield's case, she was, at the time that she wrote this letter, in a deserted, remote hotel writing a story which was set in a villa in the south of France. And Andrew Bennett makes the comment that many of Mansfield's stories examine this complex relationship between writing and life, between story and autobiography. And these stories examine this strange double life and ask the question, how is it possible to be writing in a hotel at the same time as you are in the villa of fiction? And that's where the theme came from. And all the writers examined that theme in, as Lynn has said, in really incredible and different and interesting ways. And for myself, I think that writing has this public-private dichotomy built into it, where you are a solo person in solitary confinement, almost writing. And then there is this very public-facing aspect to the writing when it goes out into the world and people can read it. And there's also the very public-facing job of a writer these days, where you have to appear, or you don't have to, but you appear in writing festivals and events, and there's a very public aspect to writing, so that it's a very in that way a very kind of at odds, this double private public aspect to writing. And I think that often finds its way into people's writing because it is such a strange experience. And I just really enjoyed the way that people interpreted and answered this theme in their writing. I thought it was quite incredible reading all the stories.
Really, really interesting. Fiona.
Well, what I'm aware of listening to you all, I'm experiencing this kind of jolt that you're talking about, Gina, that I've just spent the day at my desk. I'm struggling with a book which has been going for 2 years and which I'm just desperate to get off the desk. I'm frantic to get rid of it. It's just driving me insane. But I wanted to, because I'm old, I'm 78, and people are beginning to fall off their perches around me a bit. And I wanted to write the book that I've sort of skirted around all my life, and I've never really attended to it, trying to figure out for myself what it means to be living here. Just the complexity of being from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and being of Pākehā descent, and of being the kind of person I am, a female child, working class female child, growing up here. But I don't want to just write about memoir. I want to write about these big themes that have been around me in that time, in this country, this unique, extraordinary place where we're attempting some kind of thing that's not been attempted anywhere else, I don't think. This attempt towards equality, an equality of respect for one another. And I've been trying to deal with that, and I've been deep in it. And then this evening, I was thinking, oh God, I'll have to do a Zoom meeting. And I'm not very good on Zoom meetings. They usually go wrong when I try to do technology. So I was fretting about that, and then about meeting you all, which is lovely. But I'm actually a hermit. I lived for 30 years at the end of a gravel road on Banks Peninsula. Just me and my husband in this little old farmhouse, and I'm now living in a city. And every time I go out the door, I feel that thing that you were mentioning, Gina, between where your head is in this very intense, slightly insane sort of world where you're hearing voices and composing scenes that don't exist, but they feel real while you're in them. And then you have to walk out the door and, and talk to the neighbour about, I don't know, who's going to put the rubbish bins out or whatever that is. And there's that jolt always. And so that's what I'm feeling right now, dealing with the theme. I think it's inevitable. It's just part of the work we do. We live, we exist for our work. We're somewhere on the edges of sanity and insanity, not in a serious bad way, but in a really good, useful way. But there is a kind of disjunct between being at your desk, which is so intense and wonderful and exciting and thrilling, and finding out what's inside that weird brain you've got. And then there's this everydayness of your life, not to mention the performances one has to do nowadays. Anyway, so that's my take on the topic right now.
Oh, interesting, Fiona. It's that, and what you were all saying, that idea about the sort of sanity and the insanity and the spaces that we necessarily have to occupy while still moving through mundane, ordinary life, going to the supermarket or whatever it is we need to be doing, the tasks at hand, creative life that's so vibrant. And it reminds me a little bit of that shadow world that's our dream world, because I know everybody must have the same experience, that you have these amazing ideas in your dreams, and sometimes you grasp them, and sometimes they're just out of reach. And that kind of thing happens all the time, I think, in creative writing. If you marshal it too much, if you force it in with a kind of a top-down vision of I know exactly how it's going, that might become evident. So if you can find that kind of balance, which is also a bit of a double approach to writing, sort of the kind of organized top down, but also that organic bubbling up that's almost dreamlike, that you can move through spaces. Again, coming back to earlier notes about uncertainties, that the uncertainties have to exist and have to pull us forward, perhaps, which allow, again, more of that kind of double existence, perhaps. Just last week, I had somebody say to me, "What? You don't have a proper author profile photo? What are we going to use?" And it was in an email exchange with several people. And one person said, "The only photos I have of Michelle is she's outside, she's with sunglasses or hats or a snorkel."
I like
It's
the
true.
snorkel.
It's such a good photo, too. It's one of my favorite ones. I think, well, why wouldn't they just want to use that? But that idea, going back to Gina's point, that, and this performative aspect, there's a public persona or a public performance element, or going out and talking about what you're doing alongside doing it, to talking about it and to doing it. They have to live side by side as well. I wonder if you all have any other comments around that, Lynn or Gina or Fiona.
I just wanted to say that uh, one of the things that people did with their stories, and it'll be really interesting for those of you who are here to hear some other stories today and see others as they are published. But people looked at double cultures, double demands on someone, double loves. There was a lot of exploration of what would you say, sort of plurality in what people wrote about.
Mm. Mm.
I wonder if that would be a really interesting moment to open it up to the group. And of course, Lynn and Gina and Fiona, please keep talking as well. But what does anyone hear? Would you like to jump in and talk about that? How challenging was the theme? Did it take you to places that were unexpected, or did you immediately know what you were going to write? And how did you expand the theme, in your own creative approach to story writing? Did it change anything for you? Anybody want to comment on that? You can just unmute and jump in, or you can raise your hand if you want. You can keep it quite formal or more classroom-like if you prefer. I'm hoping somebody will just jump in. I see that Tim is unmuted.
Yeah, yeah, I'm unmuted, but I don't know what to say to that.
That's fine. You don't have to say anything. But the idea of double life, I mean, it can be quite tricky, or it could just be overflowing with places to go. And yet, for this particular competition, it is limited by that word count cap of 1,888 words. So perhaps those constraints create challenges or allow for that creativity to take place, because you have a, and that's also a double kind of approach to storytelling. You have the cap and the constraints, but you also have then free reign inside of that, because this story competition, I think, is unique in that it invites you to be as experimental as you like. It could be a set of connected smaller fictions. It could be hybrid in some way. It could be one long, straight short story involving dialogue, etc. So there are, as Lynn suggested, and Gina has as well, there are so many different approaches to the theme, but also not just in the content and what you chose to write about, but how you did it. Maybe that opens up this topic of the double approach to storytelling. Jessica.
Yeah, I found it wasn't just double lives. The more I investigated my character, and I wrote several pieces, but each character has more than two lives. And then if I start analyzing myself as I'm writing, there's more than two there. And if we talk about going out the door, whoever we meet is a different life to the next person in the way that they interpret us. Yeah, and I think that enriches the story, because you've got more than one character, you've got more than one life going on and one interpretation of that, which makes it exciting.
Yeah.
Michelle, one thing. Sorry.
Oh, you go, Kirsty.
Go ahead, Kirsty, and then
You
Tanya.
go, Tanya. I already talked.
You're up,
Oh,
Kirsty.
okay.
All right.
Are you going, Kirsty? Sorry.
All right. I'm going to say that it's awkward when you can only I can only see 5 people, so I didn't realize you talk. Sorry. I have been thinking about how there's a story that we write and that we're working on, and then there's another story about the writing itself, the technical elements that we might be trying to play around with or bring into the story, or we might be just trying to balance the light and the dark in the frame. And so I've started to write, as well as the story, that I've started to write the story of how that story came to be. So that, to me, that's sort of like a double life, because it's actually in the second story around process where I feel that I'm always trying to be honest in my writing, but I feel the greater honesty is actually where I'm thinking about the construction of the art. So to me, that second story is important for me to tell as well. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, it's actually a really interesting response, because it talks about, it addresses that idea of this, again, the content, the story that you want to tell, but also the process of telling it, which relates to a question we have in our chat window. One writer one person watching asks, is writing real living? So in that way, I don't know. I wonder if you can answer that, Kirsty or Tanya, because you were about to speak as well. But is writing, let me read that again to make sure I get the exact quote. Is writing real living?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say I think it was a lovely theme, and I think it probably resonated with many of us because of what the speakers were saying earlier of that double life we all, I think experience as writers, that you are just immersed in this other world that doesn't exist but feels so real and is completely absorbing. Um, so yeah, and when I saw that theme, it just struck a chord because you're already kind of living that anyway. Um, in my case, I had already started penning a short story and then came across this competition, and that story, the way it was heading, fitted nicely. So, but I think I also took to heart it talked about, I can't remember the exact wording now, but I'm sure the word strange was in there as well, and encouraged to be experimental. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of it too. What was the question? Is writing living?
Is writing real living?
Real living?
Yeah.
Well, I would say yes. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah, because
wonder.
again, I think for many of us, that's when you probably feel at your most real in some ways. As I don't know how the others here tonight, but I think I'm certainly an introvert by nature, and it's through writing that you often can feel your most real, I would say, for me anyway.
Yeah, really interesting. Anybody else want to comment on that? I see lots of people nodding and smiling. Renee?
Yeah, in my case, it was actually what happened in real life. As usual, I knew the deadline was coming up and had no inspiration. And then I was going to pick up something, and I drove in an unfamiliar part of the city past someone sitting with their back to me on a park bench. And I kept on thinking about why this person was just sitting there looking at grass with nothing else to do. And that became the start of my story. And then it went in really weird directions. So I just let it. So I was also reading a book called The Secret Life of Fungi by Martin Sheldrake, and so the fungi got into it, and I think I had a wooden box on my desk as well, and that made it. So it was just random things that I encountered through the relatively brief period that I had to work on my story, because as usual, a deadline was coming up, and that's often how I write. I have a deadline and and I do the work. I'm sure many people can relate to that, but I was like
Absolutely.
panicking. I was like, oh my God, it's coming up. So I had to put everything I had. Yeah.
Also, yeah, how the things around us play into the writing life. There's not really this dichotomy. Writing, I don't think anyone in this room would say, oh, yes, writing is escapism. It's not a way of getting away from real life. It's about living more deeply in that reality, which relates to the follow-up, which our viewer is asking. And by the way, the viewers, some of you will know this person. It's Vera Dong. Vera won the National Flash Fiction Day competition several years back. A lot of you will know her writing. So Vera is saying maybe writing is deeper living. And that goes with the very thing you were talking about, Renee, sitting in the grass, just observing and doing nothing else. Maybe that is deeper living, and it feeds the deeper writing, which is deeper living. So all of that, I think, relates somehow.
I wanted to say, when you were talking about it's also processing. So for me, it was also like the actual process of writing allowed me to link some ideas that I'd been thinking about. I wasn't thinking about writing a story. I was just nuttering away in my head about different themes. Is It's about double lives and around lives that expand outwards and touch each other and then change each other's lives. I mean, which I guess is an interpretation of double lives, but and this goes back to my theory, I guess, which I developed when I was trying to come to terms with the loss of somebody that was really dear to me, you know, about the idea that each person's life is like a stone splashing into a pond, and the ripples move outwards, and the ripples eventually intersect with other people's ripples and change the trajectory. And so each of us throughout our day is, you know, being changed even by the strangers that we walk across. We might change direction because and something else might happen, and it was a fun idea to explore, I think, in the context of a very short, you know, of a very short story that's still not flash. So I'm still interested, you know, like going back to one of the early questions that you posed, Michelle, about length and how that constricts, because I was like, oh, that's way too long for a flash, but it's also not really a short story. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So it was pretty funny watching that word count and restraining myself.
You know, I'm actually really wondering, I didn't do any work. I mean, we looked to make sure everybody's within the word count, but everybody always is. Did anyone write exactly 1,888 words? Yeah, Lynn, you're nodding. Ah, Tanya, did you?
I did, just for fun, really. I just thought it would be, you know,
Yeah,
the challenge.
yeah, those
try and be
little
exactly,
challenges.
because I love the reason for that word count. So I thought I wanted to therefore, yeah, match it.
And Kristen, I think I saw Kristen's hand go up as well. Did you do that too?
Did as well, yeah. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
I'm joining from Ireland, so it's very early in the morning here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote exactly that number of words, and I really enjoyed having that word count because it put a restraint on the story in a way. And again, like Renee's saying, it's not that long, but it's not that short. So it's a very interesting word length. I just wanted to say something about his writing Real Living. I think it's one of the best ways to live. And I also think, which echoes something someone else has said, you know, it's one of the best ways to understand how to live and the ways in which we live. So, yeah, and with regard to the theme of double life, I was thinking about the ways in which stories have a double life. There's the story that you're telling and that you want to tell, and then there's the story that the reader receives, and it can often be a story you hadn't even imagined in their head, you know. And so I think often of short stories as portals, you know, that contain much more than you ever thought you were putting into them. So I think every story has a double life. It's the life the writer has given to it, and then the life it has with the reader. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really lovely comment. Fiona, were you about to say something?
No, I was just nodding in agreement.
Okay, just nodding along.
Yeah, no.
That seems like a really good, what a wonderful conversation, and so interesting to hear all of your comments and the way you came at the theme and the way it still resonates with you. And I think that happens with short story writing as well. You write it and maybe it's finished, but it still has a life of its own, which I think is something that Kristen was alluding to there. And that's something really wonderful about the short story, I think, and about all creative writing, really. Before I hand it over to our judges and we move into the next part, which is going to be the discussion of the stories, one last thing that I would note, just looking around this room, some of you I've never met, some of you I do know, and we've crossed paths here and there. It's also really worth noting that the people who enter this competition, you work as various ways across the creative forms. So, you know, some of you are poets and memoirists. Some of you are poets and playwrights. Some of you are short story writers and novelists. So, and Kirsty is a visual artist as well, and there might be other visual artists in the room. Sharni Wilson is a translator. She translates Japanese profession. That's her profession. You're always working across languages. I'm just going to ask you really briefly, and then we'll go in. Does that impact the way you think about double life as well, Sharni? Moving in languages like that?
I think it does, because I see the difficulty, you know, on a daily basis of holding these two things, you know, transferring one to the other and back, and seeing how these coexist. So I think it's a really good example of a double life, and I think this theme has this incredible richness about it that could be interpreted in so many ways. Now that you mention it, I think, why didn't I write about translation? That would have been really interesting. But I think it could have gone down so many paths. So I'm really excited to see what people have done.
Yeah, really neat. Yeah, really interesting. So it's worth noting what a diverse and creatively imaginative group of writers we have, working across forms, exploring in new ways always. And I think we're in for a really delightful second half of our program. So I'm going to go straight away now to Lynn and Gina and ask you to bring us into the conversation about the short story writing. You've already talked generally about what you read this year. So maybe now is the time for you to talk about how you read the stories, what you discovered, how you arrived at placements, and then give us the placements. And I think when we get to third, we will then ask that writer to read the story. And then when we get to second, we'll ask the second place person to read, and then we'll come up to the first place. So over to you two, Lynn and Gina.
So at this point, are you thinking you'd like to hear about particular stories?
Whatever you and Gina have prepared. You already spoke a little bit generally. So if you have more general comments, that's absolutely fine. If we want to talk about how you arrived at the short list, for example, well, yes.
Sure.
We actually wrote a commentary, so
fantastic.
Maybe Lynn, you could read our commentary.
I think I would rather talk about the sort of things that we were looking for.
Yeah.
So the competition was called the Katherine Mansfield Sparkling Prose Competition, and that was something that I took quite seriously, and I took it to mean that the prose that was making up the story was in some way not ordinary, and that it was doing something that we don't maybe often get or we don't expect. So I guess I'll speak a little bit. I'll speak in as if Gina and I are the same person, but we're not. But for the moment, we are. So we were looking for something that fitted its form and its structure. So this is something which is extremely difficult to describe, but sometimes when you read things, they're tugging at the form that they are squished into, and you can feel that they want to be something else, or they're just not comfortable in their form, or what you're reading isn't the form that would allow the story its best access to the story. And I guess so one of the things that we were looking for was that the person who had written this had chosen kind of appropriately to write it as a short story, and that it couldn't have been anything else. As I said at the beginning, that's kind of like, a bit magical and rather hard to pin down. But sometimes when you read things, you can just feel that they're squished up too tight into their form, or they're a bit loose in their form, or whatever. So we were looking for something that was using its form and structure to advantage. And you can see and you'll hear when people start reading that people's interpretation of how you could actually tell these stories was quite diverse and quite hybrid. So some of them were, not at all a conventional beginning to end narrative. And so that was very skillfully done. So that's kind of what we were looking for. Would you like to have a look at some of the other things, Gina, that you were interested in?
Yeah, I think you've pretty much covered it really well, Lynn. We, as we've said in the commentary, we looked for craft, and I think you've covered this: the craft, the originality, and impact, and something new to the table, something original, and something that invited the reader in and was memorable, and something that really stuck with us. There were so many stories that had incredible imaginative structure, as well as use of language, and just really good story craft, and were really interesting and amazing stories to read. And you'll see this, as Lynn was saying.
Mm. Mm.
Do you have any other general comments, or do you want to go on to telling us the awards, maybe beginning with the highly commended and working our way up? And again, asking them the top three read. Are you there, or do you have more things you'd like to add?
No, I don't. I just wanted to say that the stories that we're going to be hearing tonight were really memorable and visceral. And I think you'll find them memorable when you get to hear them too.
Wonderful. So with that in mind, I'll just remind our viewers that people in the room out of this competition are from the shortlist, and arriving at the shortlist is no small task for judges. We always have two judges, usually with different backgrounds and reading styles and approaches to literature. We do that with the National Flash competition. We do that with this competition. And I find everybody in the group always finds the judges' remarks and the results really so thorough and so considerate, meaning really considering all points of how you arrive at a set of winners, which of course, again, is not easy at all. So it's wonderful to see the shortlisted writers here. A few of them are missing, but perhaps at this point, with the viewers as well, we could give a very big round of applause to the shortlisted writers for making it this far. I know I want to clap vigorously, but it'll just be loud. So yeah, so congratulations to everyone who's on this short list. It's a very fine list this year. And I'll remind viewers also the short list will be published towards the end of the month. We'll get there and all of that will come later. But for now, back to Lynn and Gina. Maybe you'd like to present some of the shorter lists. Lynn, you're muted.
I can't quite understand what you're asking. What is it that you want us to do?
Well, I think we're at the point in our evening where it's time to announce who is on the highly commended and the winners lists. Starting with the commended or highly commended. Are you ready for that part?
You want us to announce them?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I wasn't quite ready for that.
Well, I can announce them. I mean, I have it right in front of me.
That'd be good.
You've done a very thorough response here. So I can easily do that if you'd like. I just assumed often the judges want to share the lists. So
No, happy for you to do it, Michelle.
I'm happy for you to do it too, Michelle.
Okay, all right, I'm going to do that. All right, so what I have here is a list. The short list consisted of, the long list was quite long. I think it was around 40. Short list was 16 stories. And out of those 16, we have a highly commended list of 5 stories. And then we have third and second and first. So I'm going to name the highly commended stories. And they are, and these we won't hear tonight, but they will be published, so you will all be able to read them. Pardon me. They are, the highly commended are Father Figures by Gemma Richardson, Drowning by Jessica Labaz, 1 Week to Live by Michael Boutour, On the Couch by Kristen Leach, and Untethered by Tanya Norfolk. So congratulations to you all for being on that highly commended list. Oh, I like the confetti or whatever it is that Shelley has. That's quite nice. Yes, and high-tech clapping coming from Hayden. Excellent. Thank you all. All right, now we're going to go to third place, and I'm going to announce the third place winner and then ask this writer to read the story. So third place goes to Janice Faced Survival Mode by Sharni Wilson. Sharni, congratulations. And we would love to hear your story.
Thank you. Right. And thank you for saying the words Janus, because I still am not sure about how to pronounce it. So I'll just start reading from the beginning. Janus Faced Survival Mode. The neighborhood foxes were getting bold. They swarmed in the dark over bins the council claimed were fox-proof, but this should have been low down the list of worries. Despite the list, it was the ridiculous tedium that claimed her. Endless child-related tasks, laundry, next task, and they piled up like that laundry basket. How to clean vomit smushed into carpet, into a mattress, a couch. Food on the floor, wallpaper, and hair. Buckets full of towels. Low battery warnings blinking, ignored. Late at night, she painted a canvas in another room, acrylic splodges on the skirt she wore day and night, mingling with other stains. The hidden foxes came out in the wee hours, wailing and grunting outside. Like worries enfleshed, crouching under cars, emerging to tip out black banana skins, slimy carrot peel, and chicken bones indecently exposed to the light of day. She didn't have the leisure to collect these fragments into well-formed thoughts. They lay broken in piles on the pavement like the bones, ripped from context. Her paintbrush worked to hold off the worries, obscuring a vulpine crouch with layer upon overlapping layer of russet and white. A banal animal portrait, like countless idealized others since the Paleolithic. If you look at the tail, you can tell whether a fox is in good condition. Her brush expanded its contours, daubing soft, glossy fullness. Once the child learned how to talk, it said, "I love whole mama. I love mama, head and arm, and especially eye. Then she can look at me all the time." The half-asleep child reaches out to the pillow by her side, not the woman behind it. A stranger who saw the cowering fox in the picture's frame might know more about this animal than she could know about herself in that moment. She had to learn to act like a person again. She had to squeeze out a small space, back arching for leverage, shoving with knees, elbows, just enough, as reality stretched to infinity, one task at a time, to see, to breathe, to be. When she rushed into the girl quota squad session she was supposed to be presenting at, 2 minutes after the time it was supposed to start, her male co-worker was already galloping through the final bullet points of her hour-long presentation on networks to the captive audience of high school girls. She had been up most of the night with her vomiting child and hadn't had time for a shower. At least it was a volunteer-run event, not a typical workday. "I think I've covered everything. That's all we have for this session," he wrapped up with a winning smile. "Sorry I'm late," she managed. 58 minutes left to go in the session, and he'd already given the entire hour-long presentation she had taken the time to prepare. What was she supposed to do now? Tap dance? "You're late," he snapped. "We started at 8:30 a.m. because that's when the girls arrived. They may as well work on their websites now." She shrugged and slumped into a seat at the back, glad of a minute to sit down. Soon, she was called to help a pair of girls who weren't able to commit their code. She sat there watching as they refused to relinquish control of the keyboard and mouse, and also wouldn't listen to a word she had to say. It was true, they weren't able to do commits using the tool they'd been provided with, she could see. She suggested using the command line, but the girl who was dominating the pair ignored her as if she hadn't spoken, beneath contempt, beneath even notice. Go here, select the part you've changed, and then copy-paste it here, then save it, the girl told the other. This solution worked, but defeated the purpose of using version control in the first place. They might as well be using a basic text editor. Her male co-worker came over. What seems to be the problem, he said, and they turned to him straight away, body language full of deference, explaining in detail. He clicked from window to window, blindingly fast. The tool's not working. Let's use the command line instead, with a smug smile of superior knowledge. She felt burning rise in the back of her throat, which she hoped wasn't the beginning of the spew bug she'd been dealing with all night, and let her eyes unfocus, attention drift. No one needed her this instant, and her daughter was home with her dad, but perhaps a hint of gastric acid wafted from her vicinity. She'd scrubbed with a wet flannel in front of the bathroom sink, but there could be particles in her greasy, unwashed hair, tied back as tidily and tightly as she could manage. Noticing the circles of reddish-brown paint under her nails, she curled them protectively into her palms. At least she didn't have to worry about leading this workshop. Clearly, her male co-worker was in his element, lapping up attention from the girls interested in a lucrative programming career, and to be honest, he was doing a pretty good job. As he stood at the front, once again dominating, smiling, charming, the only man in the room full of women and girls, a manager looked over and whispered, "He's really talking a lot," as if there was something that could be done about it. She nodded in agreement, shrugging, but couldn't summon the energy to care enough to step up and take a more active role. The more talking he does, the less is expected of me. She told herself she didn't need to fight every battle. It wasn't a big deal letting a male co-worker dominate the Girl Coder Squad event. It was the kind of thing that happened every day. And for these high school girls, it was a taste of what working in the field was like. That was the idea, after all. But she found it triggering. Since she was young, she'd been taught in 1,000 tiny ways that technology belonged to men. Her dad had told her there was no point learning science because you'll just grow up and marry some guy, his voice thick with disappointment. She gave herself an inner shake. It was her turn to speak now, and she told them how long ago at her all-girls high school she had gotten the idea from somewhere that if she kept on studying science, computers, or even reading science fiction, that she would never get a boyfriend. Back then, boys were mythical creatures, but she didn't even know how to talk to. But nevertheless, she had hidden the Asimov and tried to be what these mythical beings might want. Shiny, glossy, put together, the opposite of her current state. Then, when she'd gone back to study computer science later in life out of sheer frustration, that's when she met the man she would end up marrying, and they had bonded over programming. And when she didn't immediately grasp his explanations, he would in fact get annoyed rather than be reassured by her unthreatening lack of smarts, although she didn't get into any of that. And the girls laughed in the right places and clapped, bathing her in warmth. "I'll look forward to seeing you when you finish university," she told them. Who knew? Perhaps she would see them. In this nice office, where some co-workers freely commented on her breasts and appearance, suggested she act as PA to her notoriously forgetful manager, excluded her from their all-male pub sessions, or demanded she hand over the faulty laptop she used, these devices were in short supply, to a real programmer, but at least there were now taps for hot, cold, and even fizzy water in the kitchens on every floor. And to be fair, many other co-workers were incredibly kind and generous. It was just a big office. They were lovely girls in general, and she wished them all the best. If enough of them went on to work in tech, perhaps they would create their own critical mass and be able to support and lift each other up. She wanted to care about them even more than she did, but her caring and energy were severely limited. She needed to get through this day, this hour and this minute, earn money, get paid, make it back home to what she saw as most important right now, keeping her child alive and happy. And while the office-based role faded a little in comparison, she luxuriated in the freedom of going to the toilet alone and whenever she felt like it, thinking about abstract concepts, eating with leisurely slowness. She wanted to hold on to both lives to make this work, but since she'd gone back to 5 days a week, she started to feel like her body itself was breaking down on a fundamental level. Teeth cracking, hair falling out, odd skin problems. All things considered, she was very lucky to be here, to even have the option to get here in the first place and to keep their family above water. She had managed to hold it together this far, and she hoped to keep doing that. But she wondered if there was a point at which she would have to admit defeat. An ending. She sensed that if there were, it could be much closer than she imagined.
Lovely.
Thank you so much, Sharni. Wonderful to hear it read, to hear all the dynamic in the voice and the story and the movement. Yeah, really great. So we'll move on to our second place story, and we will hear it read, I hope. Second place in this competition this year is A Cigarette at Taurua Stream by Anna Skate. Anna, congratulations, and we would love to hear you read your story.
Thank you. Sort of wasn't expecting to, yeah. A Cigarette at Taurua Stream. It's not weird, Clip said. It happened way before Dad got together with her mum. His fishing rod was lying beside him. We were sitting on the shingle on a grubby bath towel he kept in the boot of his car. He had just finished telling me about the time he made out with his stepsister back when we were all in year 9. Isn't it still a wee bit? Nah, he said. He twirled a stick in his left hand and grinned. Just awkward at the dinner table after they got married. Okay, so here's what I want to know. Say you could see into the future. If you knew she was going to be your stepsister, would you still do it? Yeah, definitely. Wow. I don't get guys. I slapped at a samphire on my ankle bone and reached into the front pocket of Clip's backpack for the insect repellent I knew would be there. Clip stood up and edged closer to the water. He usually fished down near the mouth where everyone went. Today he'd wanted to go further up to where the twin strands of Taurua Stream joined the main river. Whenever we had nothing to do, Clip and I just got in his orange Corolla and took off somewhere. We were done with high school and there'd been a whole summer to use up. Today we're going where the trout aren't, he'd said when he picked me up that morning. I can't be asked talking to people. He got the nickname Clip when we were in Mrs. Talbot's year 4 class. It was just after his mum left. Clip's dad lost his rag when he was giving him a haircut. He couldn't fit the comb on the clippers, so he just shaved it all off, down to the skin. Clip's scalp was pale blue, and he had a 3-pronged scar like a sparrow's foot near his left ear. The same thing happened with his 10-speed bike. His dad couldn't get the screws to loosen to lower the seat, so he launched the crescent wrench across the garage and told Clip, "You'll just have to bloody learn to ride the thing." He lost his temper, Clip's dad, but only at things, never at us. Clip kept his head shaved for years, but this summer he'd let it grow out. He was barefoot, and as he crept into the shallows, his toes crunched over, gripping the wet pebbles. "There's a fish." He turned and grabbed his rod. "Do you see it? Under the willow," he whispered. "Yeah," I lied. He fixed his gaze on the pool where he'd seen the trout and reached for the end of the fishing line. It was tangled and he couldn't get it unhooked. "Keep your eyes on it," he said, and propped the rod between his knees, using both hands to try and untangle the bird's nest of fishing line. I stood up. I thought I could see the fish, but I wasn't sure. I thought I might be tracking the movement of a shadow under the water. Clip tugged at the handle on the reel, but it wouldn't budge. His cheeks reddened. He struggled with it, swearing to himself. After a few minutes he stopped, pursed his lips, and blew all the air out of his lungs. "Where are you?" he said, but the fish was gone. Clip held the rod above his head for a moment and then chucked it hard against a rock. The real word. I lowered myself back down onto the towel. "I'm going for a piss," he said, and stomped into the bush. When he pushed back out through the trees, it had started to rain. "Got a jacket?" he said. "No." It rains on the West Coast almost every day, but I had never wanted to get too good at dealing with the place. Clip took his puffer out of his backpack and we sat with it draped over our heads, watching the drops dimple the stream. "What time's your bus tomorrow?" he said. "First thing, I leave here at 6. By 8 p.m. I would be in Wellington. The next day, I'd take the bus to campus for student orientation. Do you need a ride?" "Mum will take me, I guess." "When do you start work?" "I don't know. My uncle will let me know. They're not that busy at the yard yet." I nodded. He dried his hands on his shorts and slid a packet of Dunhill Reds out of his shirt pocket. "Last one," he said, lighting up. We passed it between us until the rain stopped. "Come on then," he said, stuffing the jacket into his backpack. I stood up, pulling my damp jeans away from my skin. Clip walked to the edge of the stream, crouched to drink, and splashed water on his face. I followed him up the track, through the bush to where he'd pulled the Corolla off the road into the long grass. The doors were unlocked and the keys hanging in the ignition. He got in and turned the key. The radio started. I looked over at him from the passenger seat. A hint of a moustache darkened his top lip. "Why didn't you ever try to make out with me?" I said. "What?" He laughed. I looked down at my hands. "Well, I don't know. You literally did with everyone else." "Nah." He turned the wheel and pulled the car onto the gravel road. I reached over and turned the radio up. Clip rolled down the window. Maybe what? "Maybe because I could see into the future," he said. "Oh, yeah?" "Yeah," he said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Am I dropping you off at home?" I sank down into the seat and propped my feet on the dash. "Not yet," I said. "Let's go for a drive."
That's lovely.
Thank you so much, Anna. And congratulations for your second place story. Really wonderful. And as I've said before, we'll publish all of these and you'll be able to read them as well, along with hearing this recording if you want to tune in to the readings, along with reading the stories on the page. So now we come to our first place prize. In the first place in the 2025 Katherine Mansfield Sparkling Prose Short Story Competition is The Knockin' by Lorraine Carmody. Lorraine, congratulations. It's interesting to see that some of the writers in this group have been in the competition before. So it's really wonderful to see people coming back, keep bringing your stories and seeing how they go in a group of stories. So Lorraine, really wonderful to see you here. Congratulations on this placement. We look forward to hearing you read.
Thank you. Thank you, judges. The Norkin. The stories interspersed with the Norkin is a Scottish Highland traveller, and it's interspersed with language used by Scottish Highland travellers. So anyway, I'm thinking of my father now, flat on the lawn, laughing, singing, crying. No, not crying, but on the verge of getting up and falling back down. Tears fill his eyes, but they're happy tears. I'll think this. Rocky and Phil, the apprentices, are there, not in their overalls with the splattered paint, but smart in their flares and floral shirts. It's the Christmas breakup. The apprentices have just dropped my father off. There's Zephyrs parked outside our house. My mother in her apron with the stains is at the door. Her mouth is tight. Rocky is at the backyard's edge, speaking to the ground. He's telling my mother about the boss, about how he'd said to them, "You boys had better take Jock home while you could." My mother's shaking her head and saying to my father, "Just look at you. But my father's not listening. He's too busy singing the songs he sings about Scotland and Culloden and the land clearances and other battles of his. It's because he's a Norcan. But I'm not allowed to talk to anyone about that. Children, kitchens. I'm at the kitchen sink now, leaning out. My sisters on either side. We're in our pajamas, us kids, us kitchens. Our father, our father calls us this. We're 9, 10, 11 years old, our arms and legs freckled bare in the warmth of the late December light. Well, says Rockhead, we'd better be going, eh? And Phil says, yeah, we'll be senior jock next year, eh? They wait for my father to say something, but my father is too busy singing. We watch the apprentices disappear around the side of the house where the Christmas lilies are staked so the wind won't get them. Then we run up the hall, elbowing, kicking, jostling to the front of the house. We line up at the bedroom window. As the apprentices get in the car, Rocky winds down his window, lights a cigarette. The Zephyr's motor starts up. Rocky rests his elbow on the open window, the cigarette in his fingers. He looks like he's a film star, I say. The car does a U-turn in the street and then they're gone. I hope Susan Reed over the fence is watching. Non-traveller or townsfolk, Hentle. My mother's turning away now, away from my father, who's still on the lawn muttering about the Hentle and other matters. My mother can't make hide nor hear what he's saying half the time. She's not from Scotland, but from here, like us. Us girls are back in the kitchen again. The oven is on, the room is hot, flies are buzzing. My mother at the door, her face flushed, has her back to our father. She's staring at something. I follow her gaze. My mother's looking at the paling fence that separates us from the neighbours, the Reeds. The fence is the height of a man. It is bottle green. My father painted it this colour because he likes being different. My mother's wondering if Mr. Reed has heard the commotion, wondering if he's spying on us, watching my father while he's lying drunk on the lawn. I know this because she's staring at the hole, the peephole in the fence. It's just above the new tree. The hole's the size and shape of an egg. Non-traveller man, Gadgie. My father is asking me to come outside now to keep an eye on your father. Well, she hasn't got time to stand around half the night wasting her time like this. Not when she's got umpteen things to do with it being Christmas. I'm the eldest. She's going back inside for a bit, she says, because she's got Christmas pies due out of the oven any time, and she doesn't want them ruined, which would be the last ruddy straw. Outside, the wind is starting to pick up. It is playing with my hair. I lie down on the lawn. I can see my father's not bothered by the gadgie over the fence. He's flat on his back, staring up at the sky. I look up. My father likes looking at clouds, the shapes of them. I can see a rabbit, he'll say, or a castle, or a man with a beard. But tonight there's nothing. I can hear the Venetian blinds rattling at the open window. Dangerous man, Shangard Gadgie. Once my mother was outside picking raspberries or string beans, it may have been, when she happened to look up to see Mr. Reed's eye peering at her through the hole in the fence. He was watching me, she said, as brazen as can be. She kept on picking, filling up her colander, pretending he wasn't there. After she'd finished, my mother went inside. She slammed the door shut and put on the jug. Mr. Reed worked at the post office in the square and wore a wide striped tie. He collected bonus bonds. My mother said the eye looking through the hole in the fence was pale blue, which is why she knew it was Mr. Reed's eye and not Mrs. Reed's or Susan's or any of the other Reed kids, because they all had dark blue eyes. I'll fix them, said my father. And the following Saturday, he got out the shovel and dug a hole and he planted a young tree, a totara, which my mother had bought. My father never went into shops or banks or places like the Working Men's Club or the RSA where other fathers went. It's because he didn't go to places where he wasn't welcome, he said, not unless he had to. Why aren't you welcome? I asked him, even though I knew it was because he was a Norcan. My father just puffed on a cigarette and stared into the distance. The only exceptions he made were the pub, but only the bottle store. And never right inside to sit down. And the library. At the library, people minded their own business and kept quiet and just looked at books. Before she went out to buy the tree, my father said to my mother, get the biggest tree you can. He planted the totara in front of the hole in the fence while we watched. That'll fix the shangadji, my father said, admiring his handiwork. I'll put the jug on, said my mother. Bad is Sharnus. My father is getting up off the lawn now.
He's weaving his way inside the house. I follow him into the kitchen where my mother is shelling peas. The Christmas pies, a tea towel over them because of the flies, are cooling on the bench. My father doesn't say anything as he stumbles past. My mother tuts. He shuts the kitchen door. I hear the toilet flush and the bedroom door close, and not long afterwards the sound of snoring. We're outside in the dark now, us girls, even though it's past our bedtime and we're in our pajamas. Our mother, distracted, has let us stay up late, just this once. We can hear Mr. Reed in his backyard next door calling for the cat. We can see his torch flickering through the cracks in the fence's palings. Tinker, 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 he calls Mr. Reed loudly. I'm half expecting my father to yell out the bad word Shanus from the bedroom. He says it whenever he hears Mr. Reed calling out Tinker. Never ever say this word, says my father, ever, even if you're calling for a cat. Drink, peeve. Got a headache, asks my mother now. It's the morning after the Christmas breakup. No, says my father sheepishly. He's jingling the van's keys in his hand. Well, you bloody well should have, she says, putting down her knife. She's icing the Christmas cake. My father's getting ready to go out, and us Kinchins are going too, in the back of the van with the paint tins and the leather and the rags smelling of turpentine. We're going to the Black Horse, where we'll stop in the drive-through. We'll watch from the van as our father, whistling, will take his 2 empty half-gallon jars into the bottle store, and we'll watch as he brings them back again, filled with beer. Got my peeve, he'll say. 1, 2, 3, yet dwee trin. We're up the road from the bottle store now at the library. My father gets out 6 books, us girls 3 each. Yet dwee trin, whispers my father. That should keep you Kinchins going over the holidays. We're going camping on Boxing Day. After the bottle store and the library, usually we go home. But today my father says he's got another stop to make. Where, I ask? TK, says my father. TK is where Rocky and Phil live. We've been past it before, our father pointed it out. It's a 2-story house, wood and white, with a big front lawn and a sign at the gate, Teikanga Māori Trade Training Hostel. We wait inside the van while our father, carrying a plate of Christmas pies, goes inside. But Rocky and Phil aren't there, he says when he comes back out empty-handed. They've left already to catch the early ferry up north. The apprentices have gone home up to Wairoa for the holidays. That's where they're from. They'll be able to be themselves up there, says our father, speak their own language, live as they've always lived. Good, Bara. I'm thinking of my father now, of him driving us kids back home, of him removing the paint tins and the leather and the rags from the back of the van, of him sweeping it out and putting the tent and the camp stretchers and the sleeping bags inside. He stacks them carefully. He's whistling. We're going away for a fortnight, travelling wherever we want to, keeping to ourselves, small places, small towns, Lumsden, Gore, Waikawaiti. We'll pitch the tent. The camp stretchers will be lined up in a row. The wind will make the canvas rustle. My father will tuck us in at night and tell us stories he heard when he was a boy at the traveller campsites in the north of Scotland, with his aunties and uncles and cousins and grandparents and mother and father. He'll tell us stories about ghosts and monsters. He'll tell us about picking berries and trading horses and selling scrap metal. And he'll tell us about the signs outside the pubs and other places too, no tinkers, and how the men had to stand at the door waiting for their peeve rather than going inside where they weren't welcome because they weren't like everyone else. My mother will make a pot of tea. She'll pass around the tin with a cut-up Christmas cake. We'll have a piece. My father will light a cigarette. He'll sip his tea. He'll stare up at the night sky and look at the stars and think about things. While we're away, we won't hear Mr. Reed calling his cat at night from the other side of the fence. The Reed's cat is a tortoiseshell called Smudge. They only have one cat. Everyone knows they don't have a cat called Tinker. It'll be Bara, the camping at will. That's it.
Well done.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And thank you to everybody for reading and for being here and supporting each other in this creative writing competition. Lynn and Gina, do you have any last things you'd like to say as a sign off? And then I'll take us out for the night.
Well, I'd just like to congratulate everybody actually who entered the competition, and everyone who is part of the long list and the short list and the final 3. So it was a really amazing experience reading all of these stories, and they have lived with me ever since. So thank you very much. I wish you all the very best with your writing lives, real or otherwise.
Yes, I agree with everything that Lynn has said, and congratulations to everybody that has taken part in this competition. Congratulations to all of you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'd like to say, of course, a very special thank you to Gina and Lynn for being our 2025 judges. A really nice thank you to Fiona for joining us as well as a special guest. I think the conversation between the three of you really set the stage well for the rest of the evening. I also want to give a shout out to the At the Bay Ite Kokoro team, which includes Gina, as well as many well-known writers that you all will know, all devoted to supporting the short story form and experimental and hybrid writing. And they include people like Emma Neal and Tracy Slaughter and David Eggleton, Harry Ricketts, Katherine Chidgey, and more. It's a whole set of, I think, about 10 of us. And they really support this competition as well, because the second and third place prizes are always a bundle of books at a certain value, and they come from donations, a lot of them from these really prominent writers that we get the privilege to work with at the Bay. So the second and third place writers will be getting bundles of books. First place writer receives a $500 cash prize, which is supported by the Ōtepoti Dunedin UNESCO City of Literature. So we like to give a very big thank you to them for their generosity and their belief also in the various things we try to do to support the literary landscape of Aotearoa New Zealand, which is not easy sometimes, but there are often individuals and small groups who go out of their way to keep things alive like this competition. So it's really wonderful. Thank you also to the audience who's been listening. And I feel like I'm probably leaving somebody out, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Last but not least, of course, thank you to the writers. I echo what Lynn and Gina have said. To all of you who enter these competitions every year. There's many around New Zealand, of course. So we love seeing all the entries that are coming out. We've just had big news awards. The Sargison was just announced, of course. You all will have heard that on the weekend. The Top of the South Short Story Prize is being announced tomorrow. So there's really wonderful, vibrant short story writing scene in New Zealand. And thanks to all of you for being part of it. And we hope to see you again. Leaving anything out? Anyone else want to jump in?
The person that you forgot to thank was yourself, Michelle. Yeah, you just I've we all know how much you do and how you have boundless energy and so many projects. So thank you once again for all the energy in, I guess, rounding us up and running these things and encouraging everyone, because yeah, I see it happen on multiple projects simultaneously. So I'm in wonder.
Thank you, Renee. And on that note, I wish everyone a very good evening, wonderful week. We have big literary things happening this week, including the Dunedin Writers and Readers Festival. Yeah, so thank you all very much for being here. Good night.
Kia ora. Thank you, Michelle. Kia ora.
Thanks.